and today we're working through the TExES exams, and we're going to be working through the TExES EC-6 exam, specifically the 391 exam, and we are going to work through the English, Language Arts, and Reading portion of the exam. We're going to go over the test overview and the structure, and then we are going to work through some problems. This is part one. There are going to be several parts to this particular test. It's a big one, so let's get started. All right, so today we're working through the TExES exams. You guys have been calling, emailing, and hitting us up on our YouTube channel asking us for TExES specific prep materials. Now, I don't have a program specific for this test, but we do have some materials that will help you, and I'll link them up in the description below. So if you are in search of materials for this exam and you like our stuff and you want to use our stuff, I'll link up some helpful material that you can use below. But we do not have a specific program yet for this, but we are going to continue doing YouTube videos for this particular exam. We are working through the core subjects, the EC-6 391 exam, and that's going to be your elementary education exam. And today we're working through the English, Language Arts, and Reading portion, okay? Now, this is a huge test, so this series that we're doing will have several parts. So today we're going to go through the structure and we're going to go through some specific questions. But there's a couple things I want you to pay attention to before you even begin this exam. First of all, when you go into your portal, for your TExES exams, you can see that under the core subject EC-6 391, this is a brand new test. The last administration of the 291, which was the older exam, is coming up this December. So most of you will be taking the 391. Now, let's take a look at the overview of this test, and you just scroll down here to go to the exam framework. This is very, very important. And if you watch my videos, I'm always telling you to go to the blueprint and the test specification in order to figure out exactly what you're expected to do. And so when we click that, you can see that it breaks it all down here. This is a 5-hour exam. You have 5 hours. It doesn't mean it's going to take you 5 hours, but I mean, that's a hefty exam. This is a big one. And you've got 5 sections. And you've got a total of 210 selected response questions. So you're looking at a pretty big test. No writing on this, just selected response, or that's a fancy word for multiple choice. And you can see here the standards that they use. Now, I'm going to go through the English, Language Arts, and Reading section you can see here. And I'm going to kind of link those to the standards for TExES students. So TExES is very big on its own standards. It's a lot like Florida in that way. They've developed their own standards, so their teacher certification exams are very much aligned to their philosophy and their standards for reading, math, social science, science, and the fine arts and PE and health. Now, keep in mind, though, that most standards are similar. They're going to be aligned to the Common Core standards, and they're going to be aligned to, the major standards for English, Language Arts, and Reading. But there are some specifics here for TExES, and that's why it's very important that you pay attention to the TExES standards and pull those documents when you are working through this exam. And I will link up those documents in the description below. Remember, standards are very, very important when we're talking about assessment, especially your assessments for your teacher certification exams. All right, now you can see here under English, Language Arts, and Reading, you have standards 1 all the way down to standards 12. And then we get into the math. We're not going to do that today. So there are a ton of standards here. Sometimes these are called competencies, whatever you want to call them. This is what you're responsible for. And you can see by each standard, you have a description of what each standard is looking for here. So you want to make sure you pay close attention to that. Now, I want to just hop over to the standards really quickly in the test specifications, and let's just scroll down here. Sorry to make you dizzy. Here we go. You can see that this is going to be the blueprint for the English, Language Arts, and Reading, all right? And you can see that it is broken up into competencies here. Now, the competencies are kind of a mixture of the standards and some more specific, and you can see here, skills. And now remember, I always want you to read this because this has all the good words in it that you're going to see in the correct answer choices. So very, very important that you pay attention to this test specification and the blueprint so that you can do better on the exam and pay attention to those good words. I'm going to talk about good words in a minute. This test actually lends itself really well to our good words strategy. I'll link that up here so that you can access the good word strategy, but I'm going to talk about it also in context for this exam. So you can see here we have all these competencies and it just goes and goes. I mean, there's so much information here and you definitely want to read all of this information. Now, take a look at this. When we get into, let's just take a look at this letter D under competency 4, reading comprehension. You can see that they even reference the standards here. So you can see here where it says use various instructional strategies to enhance, and then it says for students in grades 4 through 6 and students in grades 4 through 6. So they are constantly referencing the TExES standards, or the TExES, I think they call it. It's the TExES Essential Knowledge and Skills. And its acronym is TExES, T-E-K-S. And that's right here. Now I pulled grade 4, and let me go ahead and zoom in a little bit. And so this is another document you want to look at when working through the English language arts, the math, and all of that. Now you find this on their main website here, the Texas Education Agency here. And you can see that you can pull up these PDFs, grade 1, 2, 3, and 4. I chose 4 because they said for grades 4 through 6. So you're going to really want to go through the essential knowledge and skills for those grades. You don't have to memorize them or anything like that, but you are definitely going to want to look at them and kind of look at the language and see what's going on there. Of course, they have them for math and social science and science and everything else. We're focusing on the English language arts and reading. So those are the standards we're going to look at. So you can see here when we pull those up, and again, let me just zoom in. You can see that, let's get to the standards here. Right here, knowledge and skills, developing and sustaining foundational skills. And then we have listening, speaking, discussion, and all of that. And then they have some more specific language, just like on the test. The test is aligned to these. So you're going to want to use those two documents in tandem, the blueprint and the test specifications, and the TExES, or the TExES, your standards for TExES here. Those are going to be very, very important, and you're going to see a lot of the good words in there, so make sure you read those. All right, so we've gone over the overview, we've gone over the standards. Now I'm going to jump over to my presentation so we can kind of dig in and see what is going on here. All right, one of the biggest things that I found when I was analyzing this test and looking over the standards is that in the text, they reference these 7 strands of English language arts and reading. And it's kind of like a thread or a theme that you'll see throughout the exam and throughout their standards. So it's very, very important that we understand what's going on with these 7 strands of developing and sustaining this knowledge. All right, so I want to look at that first because that has a lot to do with the exam. You can see that I have them listed here, and we have foundational skills or foundational language skills. Now this is going to go with standards 1 through 6 on the exam. I'm going to show you a little bit more in a minute how that looks. So I'm going to lay that out for you. Then we have comprehension. That's going to hit standard 7. Response is another one of the 7 strands. That's going to hit standards 8 and 9. Multiple genres, which is going to be your informational text, autobiographies, textbooks, things like that, your literary text, poems, stories. You're going to want students to be able to navigate through multiple genres or a balanced literacy program, which we talk about a lot. And that's kind of embedded in all the standards because there's going to be informational text examples, and there's going to be literary text examples and things like that. You're also going to have author's purpose and craft, which will also be in lots of the different standards. You might have a little passage that you have to read and kind of talk about what the students are responsible for knowing. We'll talk more about that when we get into the specific questions. Then we have composition, which is writing, and that's going to hit your standards 8, 9, and 12. And then inquiry and research, that's going to be standard 11. So a big part of being an English language arts and reading teacher is showing students how to inquire and research topics. avoid plagiarism, look through qualitative and quantitative research, read graphs, all of that is a big part, and discerning between reputable knowledge or reputable information and stuff that may not be, factual or true. All right. So now that we know the 7 strands, and this is important, so make sure you remember those 7 strands and take a look at them, especially if you're going to be teaching in TExES. Now let's take a look at what those strands have to do with. Now today, we're going to get through the foundational skills, and I'm going to work through standard 1, 2, and 3 here, okay? So in the foundational language skills, we hit standards 1 through 5, and I included 6. Now, I think reading fluency has a lot to do with comprehension also. So I believe 6 is a big part of the comprehension strand, but the beginning parts of fluency have to do with foundational language skills too. So I'm kind of making that blend. I'm blending it into the foundational skills and then moving it over into the comprehension. Now, when we talk about foundational skills, we're talking about beginning readers, okay? We're not talking about students who are reading fluently and, they've got evaluative comprehension and they're just able to move through things no problem. We're talking about students who are in the beginning stages of learning how to read and understanding words and letters and all of that. And so today we're going to talk about standards 1, 2, and 3, which is oral language, which is the beginning, right? We start with our oral language first. We're going to talk about phonological and phonemic awareness, and we're going to talk about the alphabetic principle. In part 2, we'll go into the subsequent standards. All right, now with oral language, I'm going to jump right into a question because I think in context, this is going to be best for us to discuss. Now, quickly through my presentation, if you see this little citation down here, this tx.nesinc.com and then preparation manual, that means this question came from one of the sample questions online. And the reason why I like to use their sample questions online is because you might see these on the actual exam and they're going to mirror what the exam looks like. So you're really going to want to pay attention to these. And I've been looking through some of these and there are some patterns I want you to pay attention to when you're working through the exam. All right, so let's take a look at this particular question, which has to do with oral language. Now, remember, we're going to work backwards. You are not going to start here and start reading all the way down because you're going to forget everything you read. First thing we're going to do is look at these answer choices here. We're going to eliminate any bad word answer choices, get rid of it, and zero in on any that have the good words we like. And I'm going to show you that in context. But if you want to learn more about good words, bad words, make sure you check out a lot of our literacy videos and our good words, bad words test strategy video, also our work backwards video. And all of that will be linked up here, down below, everywhere, okay? So let's take a look at this. Let's start with the answer choices first, all right? A, allowing students regular opportunities to read aloud in front of the class. I'm going to cross out A because if we are working on oral language, reading aloud in front of the class is part of the bad words list. Now, do we have students read aloud in front of the class? Yes, absolutely we do. But it usually is not the correct answer on this exam because it tends to put students on the spot. So it's going to be a red flag for me to cross it off. Let's go with B. Giving students opportunities to share and listen to stories in a small group setting. All right, I like this small group setting, especially if we're working on oral language. I'm going to leave B. Let's take a look at C. Encouraging students to orally respond to higher level thinking questions during class. All right. Look, oral language here is a new skill. It's a developmental skill. And if you look at higher level thinking, we're looking at critical thinking, more like comprehension. I don't know. I think I'm going to cross it off. I don't hate it, but it's not going to be the best answer here. And D, permitting students to choose which groups of students they feel comfortable speaking to. All right, this one has all kinds of problems because permitting is kind of like not the best word. We want to encourage. Permitting kind of means like we're letting them like break the rules or something like that. And have students choose which groups of students they feel comfortable speaking to. That could be a hot mess because everybody chooses their friend and then like you've got a problem with the cooperative learning here. So I don't like that at all. Looks like B is our correct answer here without even reading the question. But let's just take a look at the question first. Now, Again, I'm still working backwards. Let's look at the question stem. What strategy would be most effective in motivating students' participation in class while also enhancing their listening and speaking skills? Now, very important here. We're looking at speaking skills here. And in this case, giving students opportunities to share and listen to stories in a small group setting. We have share and listen, listening and speaking. Listening and speaking is hit in B. Let's take a look at the top part of this question just to make sure. A fourth grade teacher notices several students who are shy and reluctant to speak in class. Okay, again, this small group setting is very good for the shy and reluctant speakers because the small group setting allows them to just kind of, be with a few kids and it's not as intimidating. Reading aloud in class? No, that's going to freak them out, right? Remember when you were a kid, you had to read aloud in class? Oh my God, it was like anxiety inducing. We don't want to do that. And then respond to higher level thinking. If these kids are already shy and reluctant to speak in class, like hitting them with a bunch of high level questions in front of everybody is not going to work. And then permitting them to choose which groups of students they feel comfortable speaking with. This is called the distractor. Okay. This one is the one that they want you to choose, but it is not correct because it's not good classroom management to allow students to just choose willy-nilly who they're going to talk to. That is disorganization, okay? Instead, B is going to be the best answer here, so make sure you pay attention to that. Notice I worked backwards. I eliminate any bad answer choices. I zeroed in on the good answer choice, continue to work backwards through the question, made it a lot easier to get this one correct. All right, let's take a look at Standard 2, Phonological and Phonemic Awareness. Now, if you've seen any of my videos, you know I'm going to use this umbrella because it helps people to understand phonemic and phonological awareness and phonics. They're all PH words, and if you're not a reading person or you haven't taught reading before, they're all going to kind of get smushed together here. So let's take a look at this. First of all, we have the Phonological Awareness umbrella. Why? Because phonological awareness is the big overarching skill that kind of governs the smaller skills, the more emergent skills of phonemic awareness, which they get first, and then phonics, okay? Now, when you think of phonemic awareness, I want you to think of sounds only, all right? Sounds only. We're only thinking of the sounds in words. So if I said to you, how many sounds does the word cat have? You would go cat. 3 sounds. I don't have to see the word. I don't have to write the word. I don't have to look in the book. I'm just listening to the sounds. And I have more videos on this. I'll link them up so that you know how to work through this. Phonics is letter, sound, correspondence. Trying to work on my handwriting, you guys. I'm sorry about that. Letters, sound, correspondence, which means you see the letter and then you think of the sound. So phonics does have to do with sounds, but you have to see the letter. For example, when I see this PH in these words, I know that it makes a F sound, right? But I have to see the P and the H together to make that letter sound correspondence, that connection. So make sure you remember that. Phonemic awareness is sounds only. Phonics is letter sound correspondence together. And when we put those skills together, we need both. We have phonological awareness, all right? And so you will get several questions on this. This is part of the foundational skills of reading. This is when students just begin to learn to read. Now let's take a look at a couple of questions here. These come from our publication, so we have not cited them. So if you do not see that little citation at the bottom, they do come from a NAVA-Ed publication. Now, if I'm working backwards here with number 1, I can see that I have phonological awareness, phonics, phonemic awareness, and structural analysis. So I can't do anything with the answer choices. I have to read the question. When a student has awareness of phonemes in words are those sounds with phonemic awareness, syllables, onset rhyme segments, and spelling is phonics, he or she is demonstrating, well, what did we say before? What is the overarching skill that governs all these other sub-skills? Phonological awareness, right? That's what we want to work towards. So if we are looking at this question, it's not phonics because phonics is just spelling and we have all these other things going on here. It's not just phonemic awareness because we do have phonemes in words, but we're also looking at syllables, onset rhymes, spelling, and spelling is not phonemic awareness. Structural analysis is a piece. syllables, onset and rhyme, those are structural analysis, morphology, prefixes, suffixes, and roots. But really what this is talking about is phonological awareness, all of those skills in one, all right? Let's take a look at number 2. Now, right away, phonemic awareness jumps out at me, and this is a short little question. So I'm just going to read the question first, and it says, phonemic awareness includes the ability to. So we're just talking about phonemic awareness, and what do we say about phonemic awareness? Sounds only. So A says form compound words and combine word parts. That's actually morphology, and that is out. We'll talk more about that in subsequent videos, but I also talk about it all the time in all of our literacy videos, so go ahead and check those out. Spell accurately and decode unfamiliar words. That's phonics, not phonemic awareness. C, pronounce individual sounds and words. There it is. C is the answer. D, differentiate between homonyms and to spell correctly. Again, this is phonics. D is out. C is the correct answer there. All right, and let's take a look at standard 3, which is the alphabetic principle, a big part of the foundational skills of reading. You will see the alphabetical principle in the Pearson Foundations of Reading test, the Praxis ELA exams, the Reading and Language Arts exams, and of course here on the TExES exams. So make sure you understand what alphabetic principle is, and that is the idea that letters and letter patterns represent sounds in spoken language. It's pretty much phonics and phonemic awareness and phonological awareness all wrapped up in one. But the alphabetic principle is getting across to your students that these, symbols, the P and the H and the C and the I and the S and the X and the Z and all the letters, they kind of code for certain meanings, and together they mean things, and when they're separated they mean different things, and when we put them at the end of a word they mean things. And so it's important to show students the alphabetic principle, and it's kind of embedded in a lot of different questions and in most of the activities we do. Now, when we're talking specifically about the alphabetic principle, you might see a question like this. Now, let's take a look at the answer choices here. A, when students speak, write on the board snippets of what they say. B, have students read aloud in class to a partner. C, administer regular spelling tests. I don't like C. Do we use spelling tests? Yes, but C feels like it's not really connected to a skill right now, so I'm going to cross it off as a bad word. D, have students write down words they do not understand. Perhaps, but I don't love it. I'm going to cross it out. So I'm between A and B. Let's read the question. Which of the following would be most appropriate? And remember, we're going to see this a lot. Most appropriate for a kindergarten class learning the alphabetic principle. So a couple of things here. We're looking at kindergarten class. So we want to make sure we know that this is developmentally appropriate, what we're doing. And then we have alphabetic principle. So we're teaching students that little symbols and words themselves have meaning. So let's look at A. When students speak, write on the board snippets of what they say. Well, are we taking the alphabetic principle here and showing students how it applies to real life? Yes, we are, because when students are speaking, they're giving you meaning, they're telling you something, and when you write snippets on the board, you're showing them how those snippets represent what they said. So I love A. Let's make sure we eliminate B. Have students read aloud in a class to a partner. That's more about text and print and not necessarily the alphabetic principle. Is the alphabetic principle embedded in there? Yeah, sure. But we're looking for the most appropriate activity for a kindergarten class. And what we would be doing is having students speak in class, writing snippets and probably saying, see, when you speak and I write a snippet on the board, do you see how these letters represent what you're saying in class? And that's how we start to develop the alphabetic principle in our youngsters and our students. So that is standard 3, alphabetic principle. All right, so that was part 1 of our English Language Arts and Reading for the EC-6, the TExES exams. In part 2, we're going to go through standards 4, 5, and 6 and some specific questions there. Now remember, we have a lot of resources for teaching reading and literacy, so make sure you check out all of those playlists and videos, and I'll link them up in the description below, and you can just see them on our YouTube channel. But we also have a lot of resources on our website. If you're looking for a study guide that's comparable to this, of course, we do not have TExES finished yet, but you can use our Praxis 2 Elementary Ed English and Language Arts for this section of the exam. It will be very similar. Now, if you want to wait until we come out with our books and things like that for TExES, definitely do that. Or you can use the free YouTube channel that we have. We have a bunch of different videos there, and we have webinars on our website, which come with handouts and things like that. So there's a lot of things that you can do for free or paid if you need help with this particular test, but we are developing TExES materials. If you're watching this way in the future, then we probably already have them, so check our website. But thank you so much for watching today. Consider subscribing to our YouTube channel and give us a thumbs up if you like this video. Thank you so much. Have an awesome day.